What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
Dr. Jeremy Weisz here, founder and host of InspiredInsider.com and the co-host of Rising Entrepreneurs podcast, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. And this is going to be a great episode with Wendy, Pease, and Kerri Garbis. Before I formally introduce them, you know, Wendy and Kerri, I like to mention other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And Andrea Houston, founder of R2's Design, who's actually in EO and also in Seattle. So Women of EO, I think they have an event actually coming up soon, Women of EO, and Andrea Herrera of Boxperience, who's in Chicago, also had on the podcast, who is a woman of EO as well. And Vern Harnish has been on the podcast. That was a great episode. And my business partner, John, featured Kerri Santos as well on the Rising Entrepreneur. So check those out. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for people to launch and run their podcasts. You know, for me, you know, Wendy, Kerri, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And over the past decade of podcasting, I've found no better way than to profile the people and the companies I admire and respect and feature them in their stories on the show. So if you are a business out there and you've thought about podcasting, you should, hands down. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com and email us. We've been doing it for over a decade at this point, and I'm sure we could hopefully pretty much answer any question that you have. I am super excited. We have the CEO and founder of Ovation, Kerri Garbis, who's trained thousands of business professionals from companies such as Walt Disney, MasterCard, Verizon. And she does this. She helps them with presentation skills, storytelling, etiquette, emotional intelligence. She actually wrote a book, Presentation Skills for Managers. It's been published by McGraw-Hill. You can check her out at GetOvation.com. And she's got some great stories, some great tips for us today. We have Wendy Pease. He's the president and owner of Rapport International, a translation and interpretation services company specializing in marketing translation. And, you know, I listened to her book. She's the author of The Language of Global Marketing. And you can learn more at RapportTranslations.com. And they really opened my eyes to, you know, oftentimes I only think of the US. So when I read her book, it just opened your eyes. There's so much more outside of this from a cultural and business perspective. So I encourage people to check out her book. So thank you both for joining me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm honored to be with Kerri, and you've had some incredible other EO women on. So it's nice to hear. I'll have to go back and listen to them. I didn't realize.
Yes. Those four guests you've mentioned, I've met two of them and spoken to all three, except for the last, except for, who was it? John Santos? Is that who said?
Kerri Santos?
Kerri Santos, sorry. Mm-hmm. And yeah, how could I forget that their name was Kerri, but because I feel like I'm the only one. The Andrea and Vern, all amazing.
Yeah. Love it. I want to start off, Kerri, with you and just talk to people about what GetOvation does and what you do.
Sure. So it's truly Ovation. I just have the catchy URL of GetOvation.com.
I love the URL.
And thank you. And we're communication skills training. So anything under the umbrella of professional presence and speaker development. So we're partnering with HR and L&D departments on the corporate side, coming in to help with anything from presentation skills to storytelling to overall communication within teams. And then on the event side, the speaker development side, which is a lot of fun and kind of my favorite, don't tell the L&D and HR people, that we'll get hundreds, thousands of speakers ready a year to present at their conferences.
Yeah. And so we're going to dig deep on that because especially in this virtual world, people are probably presenting maybe more often they would in the physical world. So now we're getting back to physical and virtual. And this applies to if you're on a podcast, if you're doing a presentation, if you're doing a webinar. So we're going to dig deep on that. And Wendy, talk to people a little about you and what you do.
Sure. Well, we take it beyond just presenting in one language. So Kerri gets them all lined up with the content they need to do, and then we take it and take it across multiple languages. So we do everything from highly technical written translations like patents, or, market entry research and contracts, up to, website translation, brochures, user manuals, anything that has to be in the written form. But we don't stop there. We also help people when they're speaking. So it can be anything from the telephone, a webinar meeting, the live interpreter that's going to come with you to a meeting, like a doctor's appointment or deposition or voc rehab, up to conference interpreting. So Kerri, we should talk, because we'll work with speakers and help them present when they're going to be presenting through an interpreter. I don't know if you do that training, but that's certainly something that's becoming more and more important, because there's certain words that you shouldn't use, and humor is a particular consideration, how fast you speak, having your slides translated or advanced materials given over to the interpreters. Yeah. So we do everything to another language.
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk about that, because in your book, you talk about some funny translations like that would, if you just try and go to Google Translate, it would technically be correct, but it's offensive. So we'll talk about maybe some of the offensive translations people use, or they name their company the wrong thing, and it basically, in that language, it's actually offensive. But I want to start off, and we'll dig deep on a few topics here, but with a couple fun facts about each of you. And Wendy, we'll start with you.
These are the ones I don't know that you're going to throw at me now.
You do not know what I'm going to say here, but I do a lot of research ahead of time. But, as a young child, you lived in a lot of different places: Mexico, Taiwan, Philippines. You lived where there was no electricity or running water in a town. So I'd love for you to just talk about one of those experiences and how it shaped you living internationally.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about Taiwan. As you listen to the book, which I recorded in my basement wine cooler or wine storage room that I use for gift storage. That was a load of fun with an expert recording person. But in there, I talk about living in Taiwan. My dad was in international agriculture research. And so we were assigned to go live in a new center that was just being developed outside of Shanhua, Taiwan. And that was the small town that didn't have running water or electricity, but the center that they were building, it did. But we'd go into the town and they had never seen blonde-haired children. So my brothers and I would show up, and people there would want to touch our skin, touch our hair. And, we could buy all the fresh produce, and meat was still a scarcity, but cereal you couldn't get, except for driving about an hour and a half to Tainan, and you go into this little black market store. And so to this day, I still love cereal. I had it for dinner last night. My son happened to be out, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to have cereal. So, there's a lot of funky little things that can form when you're a child. I think it also gave me a love of cross-cultural communications. How do you communicate when you don't share a language? What can you do with body language? The appreciation that you can get in talking to people that when you don't share a language, and how you can come together and share experiences.
Yeah, one of my favorite desserts is Lucky Charms. So sometimes after dinner, I'll use cereal as a dessert. So it says there's vitamins in there. I don't know how healthy it is.
It seems healthier than cake and cookies and ice cream, right?
Exactly. For you, Kerri, I have two fun facts. One is that Annie was an inspiration for your career trajectory. So talk about that. And if you are inclined, one of my favorite songs is Hard Knock Life. So, but start with Annie. How's that been influential for you?
Well, I was 6 years old, and I grew up in Baltimore, and my parents took me to the first national tour of Annie. And I was already taking dance and playing piano and liked to sing. But after the show, we go out to dinner, and happened to sit next to all the little girls that were in the show. And this was like, to me, I mean, this was every star mega amazement to my little 6-year-old self. And I ended up in a conversation with the other 6-year-old who was in the cast. It was the youngest girl, and she was playing Molly in the show. And I was like, what's it like to be a professional actress? And what do you do? And she's like, oh, it's great. And you have a tutor and you go shopping during the day and you do a show at night. And I was like, this is great. And that I turned to my parents at that dinner and I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. My mother may have cried a little. And
happiness, right?
Right. And for years and years, I held on to that program until it disintegrated, just withered with time. And the girl who played Molly in that production was Alyssa Milano.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yes. So thanks, Alyssa.
But I hear you sing. I want to hear you sing Hard Knock Life.
I do sing. I do love Annie. So with apologies to all the Annie fans, it's a hard knock life for us. It's a hard knock life for us. Static treated, we get kicked. Static kisses, we get tricked. It's a hard knock life. And I just messed up the words, but that's fine.
Amazing. I love it. One of my favorites. I'm gonna have to replay that one, Kerri. Thank you. So
I wasn't really warmed up.
I mean, I put you on the spot, you know. So Wendy, I'll come to you in a second, but Kerri, you know, your teachings and your company comes out of your experience from, you know, acting and singing and everything that you do. Talk about the right now in-person return and events training. What's going on?
Well, it is like all of a sudden the world woke up and said, oh, right, we want to get back together. And the wonderful staff of facilitators and coaches I have, which are, by the way, all professional actors, that is the whole inspiration for the company, because I think actors have important things to say to business professionals. It is wonderful and exciting. And what has come to light just in the past couple months is that now we're getting people back together, which is great, which is really what we love. We also, you know, virtual, all good. Back together, human interaction, that's where it's at. And here's the thing. If you have a group of people coming back together for the first time who haven't seen each other in 2 years, or maybe they haven't met yet and have only worked virtually, all they want to do is talk to each other. They don't actually want to do communication skills exercises. They really want to just talk to each other. So we have been working with curriculum development and kind of reframing opportunities for people to connect and talk to each other, and putting a little education in there too. So giving time people to breathe, hug, connect, all that good stuff.
You know, both of you mentioned before we hit record about building a sales engine. And so that's top of mind. And so, Wendy, I want to start with you. And what are your thoughts? You know, there's a lot of business owners listening to this on building a sales engine.
Well, that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know if I have anything to say to business owners about how to do it. But yeah, where I've gotten to in my business is we've built over networking and referrals. And if I think about bringing in a sales team to do that, it's harder to network these days. And that's not how a lot of sales is doing. There's so much more automation at the top of the funnel, and it's so much more electronic networking. So how do you build out that top of funnel to be efficient using technology and maybe BDRs and maybe VAs from international, so that you're driving more leads into, actual buying opportunities? And we do a ton of inbound marketing, and that's been successful to a certain point. But I think you have to have inbound and outbound. so that's what we focused on inbound. I've got Lisa Ray, who's running that. She's absolutely fantastic. Now, how do we supplement that with the outbound function?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Wendy, I always have more questions than answers. So sometimes the questions are more valuable than anything else. So I want to hear your thought process and how you're thinking this through, because I think for any business, this is always top of mind. Whether I don't know if any business has figured it out. I mean, you've been doing this for over
17
a decade,
years.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, and then Kerri, I want to hear your thoughts on it, but what softwares do you like to use just in general with your company? Because you mentioned automation. Are there certain softwares that you use as a company that you like? Like we use like LastPass and ActiveCampaign. There's like a lot of different ones we like. What do you like to use?
I just started using LastPass, and now I'm converted. I think it's
Game
fantastic. Changing. Yeah, to change your passwords and easily log in and share passwords with other people that have to get in. So we're extreme HubSpot fans. So we've been using that for years. At this point, couldn't live without it. I shouldn't say that, they may double our price, but I really do like HubSpot. LinkedIn Navigator, we do a lot with that. We fooled around with Duck Soup on how to do some automated outreach. But then it's trying to figure out how to make the connections, because you can't just make connections and drop it. You've got to build the relationship. But Duck Soup's been able to help with that. We use Phantom Buster to take names and companies that we don't have information on, to try to get their name in a direct email contact. We've been trying some automated email outreach, but that hasn't worked real well. But we're still in the testing phase, and we're using Persist IQ for that. Let me see. LinkedIn Navigator has been very interesting to help us develop lists. So I think those are the key ones that we're using.
Yeah. So Kerri, we'll go to your favorite software. So we use LastPass, ActiveCampaign. Another one that I like to tell people about is Textexpander. It's the best $3 you could spend a month. So check it out. It's like a desktop app where if you type in a word, if you find yourself typing the same thing over and over, like here's my bio or here's an answer to this, you can actually save all those in Textexpander. And when you type in that word, it will pop up in your email or in social media. So we love that.
Yeah, we use TextBlaze, which is the same thing.
Got it.
I think that's free for so many things that you put in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So Kerri, what about you? What are some of your favorite softwares that you use? And I'd love to hear, how you think about the sales pipeline and sales in general.
Sure, absolutely. LastPass, yes. Huge proponent. HubSpot, love it. Slack for internal communication. We tried to move all team communication to Slack rather, so that email I can get buried under that pretty quickly. Proposify for our proposals, which all of this links in nicely to HubSpot, which I really, really like. Basecamp for project management. And then personally for my writing, because I'm a terrible speller, I use an app called Grammarly.
And Grammarly.
I don't know. For me, it saves my life. So I'm going to check out Textexpander though. That sounds really interesting.
Check it out.
Yeah.
In terms of the cash flow sales for us, the challenge is it's really, as a friend of mine, a finance guy said, it's really chunky, right? Because it'll come in and then and goes down. And the challenge is because we're working with so many very large players that the payment cycle can be net 65, net 90. And so we've done a ton of work. I've paid the staff, we've put out the expenses, and I'm waiting 2+ months to get the cash back in. So sometimes that can get a little, nerve-wracking. And what I just try to do is jam in as many sales as possible. Like I'm just a fiend for yes, we can do it. And bring in as many sales as possible. And luckily, a lot of the work that I've done over the past 10 years of having the business is building up the processes to support that, so that as much work as we're taking on, it's rolling out and delivery of it is successful versus having complaints or it's not up to snuff for our clients.
Yeah. I'd love to hear, and if you have any, Wendy, chime in too, have tips for collection purposes. I remember, I forgot what guest it was, but they said they would send a gift to whoever the person at the payment thing is, like they send them a bottle of wine like every month, just as a nice thing, and they make sure they're paid on time. I don't know if there's any tips you have, maybe keeping track in one of the CRMs to make sure that everything's paid on time, or maybe it's just all set up and you have no problems with that.
Well, anybody can send me a bottle of wine anytime and I'll absolutely pay them. Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I don't think I love that idea. That would not work for if I'm sending a bottle of wine for somebody in AP and like some gigantic company. I might think it might be perceived as a bribe. So not for me. I would say, I have an outsourced controller bookkeeper. They're sending the invoices right now. Whoever has the relationship, the salesperson, me, will then do the follow-up, and it's a pain.
Yeah, I feel like
sometimes it's a pain.
I ask because I feel like stuff can get lost, right? You send it, it's a big corporate, so it just needs to be at least kept track of and then followed up on at a minimum.
Yes.
So you'll have someone kind of who owns it, who will follow up with it, and they keep it on their list, and they're just there to follow up with it until it comes through.
Yeah. So I keep track of that through the aging report, our QuickBooks aging report. That's how I see it. And I'm like, oh no, we got to reach out to that person.
Got it. So I want to go through, so Wendy, I don't know if you have anything to chime in on the collections part, or just following up, if there's any specific process people should think about on that end.
I think like Kerri said, is you got to put a process in around it. So we outsource our bookkeeping to analytics, which is based in Massachusetts, but everything's done over in India. So when an invoice goes out, we've got a follow-up that goes out on certain time periods for when it's due. If it gets past a certain time, then we have somebody internal call and figure out what's going on. The other thing that we do for larger jobs, we take 50% payment up front, because then that enables us to cover our expenses, if we have a collection issue. So it doesn't cover all of our expenses, but it covers a good amount. So we're not struggling with that, the up and down cash flow so much on the bigger projects. And so that's been pretty good. I think over the history of the company, we've had collections issues with two big companies that, have drug out and caused us a problem. Of course, we've had, small ones here and there where, it's just a thorn in your side because it's taking more time. But
right.
For the most part, once we got the process set up, we stayed on top of it and it works.
Yeah, I asked because, even if you look at, Vernon Harsh's book, Scaling Up, one of the major sections is cash flow, right? So this is a real deal problem, or can be for businesses. So Kerri, another fun fact, because I forgot to mention when we were talking about fun facts, is, I don't know if Wendy knows this one. This is a really cool one. You actually went to school with Tupac and Jada Pinkett Smith.
I did.
Wendy, did you know that?
No, I didn't know. She continues to amaze me.
Just again, there was, whenever someone's listening to this, there was a thing that happened at the Oscars, so that Jada Pinkett Smith has been in the news. But what were they like in high school?
Okay, first of all, can I talk about the Oscars just for a second?
Yes.
There was so Jada is one of so I went to the Baltimore School for the Arts. Jada is one of the most famous alumni we have. And however, there was also another Baltimore School graduate was the conductor at the Oscars. And I feel that Dante Winslow's debut as the conductor, proud Baltimore School for the Arts graduate, it was so overshadowed by what happened with Jada. And the cool thing was that before the Oscars, that Dante and Jada were posting all these pictures of like, yo, School for the Arts in the house pictures. And they were really cool. And everybody's so proud. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Dante. And so so in
So did
high
Dante,
yes.
was he in the same class also, or was just?
He was just a couple years younger
Okay.
than me in the music department. I was in both music and theater. So it's really, really exciting. And
I mean, and just to say something, Kerri, it is a small school. It's not like there were thousands of people there, right? So
oh no, my graduating class included me and Jada, and there were 55 people in our graduating class. What I do like to throw down is this, the senior superlatives, like people vote, like most likely to whatever. Jada and I tied for most popular girl. So there's that.
That's great. That should be front in your book. Like the tagline of your book is like the quote.
That's right. Jada was very much Jada, sassy, fabulous, adorable, uber talented, energetic. Tupac was he was kind of nerdy. He was like really thoughtful and into Shakespeare, and I didn't know him super well. He was a year ahead of me, maybe two, I think maybe just a year. And but
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. I just figured, what were they like back then? So Wendy, I don't have another fun fact for you, but I do have a question. I want you to talk about, there was a manufacturing company that you worked with, and I want you to tell that story.
So manufacturing doesn't seem as sexy and as exciting as to what Kerri's talking about. And they're actually having a hard time pulling the millennials or younger generations into work for them. But manufacturing is a hotspot for technology and finding jobs. And I do a lot of talking about how they can hire non-English speakers to work, and they're good jobs for the people who are very educated but might not have good language skills. So do a lot of talking about that. But I think the manufacturing company that you're talking about in particular is a global manufacturer of like boxes and shipping materials. And they were made up of a bunch of acquisitions and had offices in manufacturing plants in different countries. And they offered different products in each of the countries, and they each had their own website. And it was a huge loss for global marketing because they weren't under one brand. They weren't sharing all the Google juice of having more people come to your website. So a very astute marketing person said, okay, we got to get control of this. And she had this massive spreadsheet of countries, products, and what was offered where, and then was able to figure out what had to be translated into different languages. And so we worked real intently with her on making sure this worked. And then they were able to launch a global website that could bring in people from all over the world, but direct them to what products they could buy in the region that they're coming from. So if you're out there looking for a job, or people that don't speak English, don't knock off manufacturing for a career choice, because there's huge potential there and huge potential for manufacturers to sell internationally.
Yeah, and what's interesting about what both of you do is, because you work with different industries, you see trends in these industries. You'll see trends in manufacturing, and so next thing, Kerri, for you, I want to ask is trends in speaker training. Before you answer that, I want, Wendy, just for you to touch on mistakes of naming. Okay, you've probably seen some mistakes of people naming products or things that are offensive in a country because people don't realize it's offensive. So I love to hear a few that are top of mind that you're like, oh my, if they would have just hired us, they would not have had this issue.
One I love that you guys are going to get clearly, because it was an Iranian company coming into the US with detergent, and the detergent's name was Barf. Here's another English one, is Electrolux, the vacuums that are supposed to be good. Over in England, their tagline was Electrolux, it sucks. Well, it came into the US and it had a different meaning, so it didn't do well.
I think that's a brilliant tagline. I would totally buy that.
If you're targeting the right market,
Right. That's right.
Maybe
That's
it's good. It's good. Yeah. The Ford Pinto tried to launch in South America. I can't remember which country, but Pinto is a slang term for male genitalia. So that didn't work. Luckily, they were able to pluck off the names and put a new one on called Corcel, which was, it meant horse where they were.
How does that something that slipped through the cracks at a company?
They don't test it. So you've got to look at who you're testing stuff. And if so if you talk about consumer products, people want to have emotional connection when they buy it. And so it's not as simple as saying, okay, we're going to do this in Spanish and launch it in every Spanish speaking country, because every place has different slang. Even if you look at New England versus, the West Coast, or the slang is very, very different. I always like to give the example of y'all, you're wicked smart. They just don't go together. Y'all Southern and wicked is New England. And so you have to think about who your audience is, and you want to test it in that audience. So when we've done brand name testing, we don't just ask what language, we ask, where are you going to be using this, so we can make sure that we have the right people testing, looking at it and telling us, does it have a negative connotation? Do you associate it with anything else?
So if you are launching a product in another country, call Wendy. Don't make the mistake of barf. I mean, I don't know how that slips through the cracks. Like, didn't they not ask someone where it was going?
Well,
what do you think about this?
Yeah, so that's kind of level one. Level two that I'm seeing now is all the e-commerce companies that are missing out on huge amounts, because you put something on a website and launch it out there. People are finding it, but if they can't find it in your language, number one, that's a problem. Number two, they're using machine translation to run their ads. So in social media, they're wasting their money completely, because if that ad doesn't resonate with the people, the culture who you've translated it for, they're going to skip right by it. So if you've got ads that aren't working, you've got to really look at what language you're using. And then the other places on Amazon. Amazon's going to show your products all over the world, and they're going to put machine translation in. So I can go in there and I can find products that have partial translation and partial English, and the translation's gobbledygook because it was done with machine translation. So you're losing all that ability. And particularly if you're selling on Amazon, they've got such good programs to support exporters so you can actually fulfill it internationally.
I think that the cultural, I'm not in this space at all, but I'm going to throw my opinion in. The cultural piece is key. And Wendy's company is a vendor of ours. Rapport International does the translating when we deliver our training in a different language. And so when we started working together, I remember you saying, well, it's not just the translation, it's also the cultural piece, how you talk about stuff here in the States. Maybe very different how we're going to talk about it elsewhere. And it's really important to keep in mind.
And Kerri, thank you. Talk about that for a second, because those are mistakes, big mistakes people make with, their product. What are some mistakes people make when presenting? We'll get to the trends in speaker training, but what have you seen? Some crazy stories with presenting and mistakes? And you don't have to name names here, but what have you seen?
Oh, I've seen some really great mistakes, including some very odd wardrobe choices but you do have to be, if we're talking about cross-cultural audiences, which is something we need to be extremely wary of in the virtual environment, because anybody can log on from anywhere, is to understand, is this story going to resonate with all audiences? Is this going to be offensive? Or for me, particularly, where I had to start to look at my own content when I'm hired as a speaker, is how American-centric are my references. There were so many things that I found myself saying, like, okay, maybe not everybody in this audience is going to know the Brady Bunch, or just
let's hit a home run, or we're in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, really,
or if you say football, some people think that's soccer, and some people think it's American football.
Yeah, but there's no worries with sports because I never make sport references. But yes, exactly. In that same vein, I recall, it was a nice reminder to me how closely I need to look at my own stuff. And then we pass that on to the speakers that we're working with as well. I have seen everything. This one guy it was at a large tech conference. We had trained him. I was standing in the back watching the session, and he came out and he told this great opening, engaging story, because storytelling is a huge thing and engaging the audience. And he was like, okay, the end of my story. And now I'm going to basically essentially say, get to my content. And he was like, okay. And he said, I don't have my clicker. Where is my clicker? He had forgotten to bring on his remote clicker, as he kept saying it. And he said, I don't have my clicker. And instead of saying like, hey, I'll get started, can somebody bring me it? He was like, wait, I'll be right back. And he runs off stage, and the tech people left his mic on. So all you hear backstage is like, crap, anyone know where the clicker, where's the clicker? Why can't I get the clicker? And so you heard that it was probably like a minute, but it was so funny. And I'm crying in the back. And then he runs out on stage and he's like, I got it. And the whole audience erupted in applause, which was really cool. I don't know, he really won them over.
I love that. So one is, don't leave your mic on if you're going to the bathroom or something, or going back. I mean, in that case, it helps. It humanizes the person, right?
Yes.
Well, except he handled it so well. I mean, to come back on and celebrate, I mean, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, he did it. He turned it around. It was really funny. Yeah.
So, Kerri, some trends in speaker training.
So when I started Ovation 10 years ago, it would be out of the ordinary if anybody called and asked for anything other than, we would like a 2-day training. Please come to our company and do 2 full days of training. Now, we haven't done a 2-day training in maybe 8 years. And prior to 2020, March 2020, it was like things were getting shorter. Yes, we had a couple full days, and then it was like lots of half days. And then in the virtual environment, just because of the way people can take in information, the Zoom, taking into account Zoom fatigue and how much everybody was spending time in front of their devices, we were recommending no more than 2-hour chunks at a time. I thought that is what was going to tide over. When we started back doing in-person in the fall, again, we were getting hired for like 1 to 2 hour things in person. I thought, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to do lots of series of stuff, no problem. Now I think just in the past couple of weeks, we've had 10 requests for, we're getting back together and we want to be back together for a full day. And so that to me is exciting.
Love it. We're going to,
surprised at that. I thought you were going to say that you kept it shorter, because I do know that when I've been presenting, it used to go from an hour, then it went to a half an hour. Now, social media is 10 minutes or less than 1 minute. So it's always taking that material and cutting it down and down. So that's great to hear that you're going back to full day. Yeah,
that's definitely on the learning and development side for programs. For speaker development, it is still lots of short little individual sessions, but on the L&D HR side, I am shocked, delighted and shocked.
I guess it's because people want to get together and talk. So you got to build in that time. And how do you get learning out of that talking? Huh. Yes. Yeah, but you can't teach people by just having them, by doing too short and not repeat on that. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, you're good. Wendy, I have a question for you, and then I'm going to come back to Kerri. Before we hit record, you said Toastmasters on crack. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But Wendy, I want you to talk about, there's a story about Staples.
This goes back to the brand name testing. Yeah, this was really interesting. we did Staples' tagline when they were still more international. It was make more happen. And they wanted to take the more out and put in other words like make work happen, make art happen. And so they asked us to translate it. And what was really interesting is you couldn't bookend the words like you could in English, and you had to get the message across. So first we had to explain that, like how the message wouldn't make sense if we still tried to bookend it. And then we had one that was make refrigerator art happen. And the French translator came back and she said, refrigerator art? What's that? We don't have that in France. And she knew what it was because she lives in the United States. And for those of you who don't know, refrigerator art is that artwork you're so proud of that your child does, that you hang it on the refrigerator. It becomes like your personal art gallery. So we went back to Staples and told them, well, there's no refrigerator art in France because the refrigerator's for keeping food cold. It's not a dual purpose. It's not your art gallery and your refrigerator. So we gave them an option to come up with something else that would substitute for it, or they just decided to do away with it. You know, coming off that story, you mentioned something earlier about the easy button for podcasts that you do at Rise 25. It reminded me of a story about a podcast host he was in India. I said, he was in India and he said, okay, I speak English. I'm going to do the podcast in English because there's a larger market for it. Couldn't get listenership. He went back to his native language that they spoke in that region of India, started doing in that, and his followers skyrocketed. So there's this whole movement to do multilingual podcasts. And if you've got any clients that want to reach an international market, you can take their recorded podcast, translate it, have a voiceover in, and then they've just expanded that content of what to do beyond. So there's all sorts of fun, creative stuff going on. Yeah.
Thanks for that idea. That's great.
Sure.
Toastmasters on crack.
That's right. So the pandemic hits. I cried in the corner for like 20 minutes. It wasn't much. And I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? How am I going to keep my trainers, which are all professional actors when everything's shut down, busy? Oh, I'm not traveling. We're not supporting 100 in-person events because there are no in-person events. What can I do? And I thought, I want to build like, you know, I want to build a modern day Toastmasters on crack. And I did. So I created a B2C platform so anybody can come in, get speaker training. It's a monthly membership. It's called StudioG. You can find it at GetStudioG.com. And which StudioG, by the way, was the original company name I had for this company when I was first like tooling around with the idea 110 years ago. And it is a monthly membership. We've got different levels. There's live weekly, everything's virtual. It's live weekly workshops. You can add on additional one-on-one coaching. We have rotating training videos, and you also have access to our exclusive AI-driven rehearsal platform. So you're able to go on, rehearse your presentations. It pumps out metrics like faster talking or how many filler words you're using. And it's an asynchronous coaching tool. So you upload it. Wendy's mouth is open, and that's cool. It means I've impressed her. So
I can't believe I didn't know about this. So I am so excited.
So I, my unofficial tagline, because I don't think I could really use it because I might get sued, is, we're Toastmasters on crack. So so any marketers out there who want, I would love to find a way to roast toast without.
Who do you think's ideal? Who's ideal for that? You think? Is it
so? It is. It absolutely could be entrepreneurs. It was. I thought of it more as somebody who's on the precipice of a promotion or people looking to make a move in their career, and they just wanted to refine their professional presence a little bit before going on an interview or maybe stepping up within an organization, or they've got a presentation. They're speaking at a conference. They're nervous. Come on in. Practice, get out, but also stay.
So GetStudioG.com.
That's right. Thank you.
You know,
Yes.
another huge target market is English bilingual speakers or people internationally. The US has a lot of
Yes.
people that aren't afraid of standing up and speaking, but there's a lot of people that move from technology, you know, positions or operational into management, and they have no skills. So have you thought about doing this in other languages too?
I would love to. And we have a couple bilingual folks on my team right now. I'm always looking to grow that.
Fantastic.
I
All
love
right,
it.
I'm going to check it out because if I
Thanks
hear
for sharing
people,
that, Kerri.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you for giving me the space to do so. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So I also just want to end, I don't want to forget to have you talk for a second about VMware.
Oh, yes. VMware is one of our clients that we support their big show, and their big conference last year was called VMworld. I encourage the universe to see what may be coming down the pike, of which I'm not allowed to say. But it was a shining moment for us because VMware had shared with me that for the past 5 years, they've always used a new speaker training company. And we supported their speakers last year. And for the first time in 5 years, they said, wait a minute, these guys are a little different. We're going to stick with them. So we're their first repeat vendor in terms of speaker training in 5 years. Something I'm really proud of. Really goes to the quality and the work ethic of the Ovation trainers, and it's a proud moment for me. So thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah. And then, Kerri, reminds me, I do have to introduce you and a shout out to Eventique, that they do events all over the country. I think in different countries, even, you know, in New York, and you guys, I see a lot of collaboration there between the two of your companies, because they basically help put on these shows all over the place.
Yes.
So I'll have to shout out to Eventique, and you'll have to meet Kerri and her company too. So thank you both for sharing your amazing stories. And I just want to point people to both your websites. You can go to GetOvation.com, or as Kerri mentioned, GetStudioG.com. And then as far as Wendy goes, you can go to Rapport, that's RAPPORT translations.com. Are there any other places online for either of you that we should have people check out?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm all over LinkedIn. So
Wendy
Wendy Pease, Pease, like peas and carrots with an E at the end. And I'm posting funny, if you like the funny stories about translation, we're posting stuff like that all the time when we come across it. If you have any, send them over to me too.
Yes, I'm on the LinkedIn as well. Are we allowed to mention our podcasts?
Of course, go ahead.
Oh, yes. So my podcast is called Speaking of Events. So that'll be a great intro to the event company that you talked to. I'd love to speak with them. And Wendy, you have a podcast too, right?
I do, the Global Marketing Show. So on all the places you find podcasts.
Well, thank you both. This has been fantastic. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.